an alarm.
Wow.
Like I'd actually set my alarm for 8 and I woke up at 6:30 and couldn't go back to sleep and was like, well, I guess my day is starting. And so I actually had a really nice morning. Like I eased into it. I did some yoga. I did my meditation app.
Good for you.
I got on cycling. And then I've been trying to be productive in a typey work way ever since.
Totally. Yeah, typey work way is often the key. All right,
yes,
now we are live. Now it is acknowledged that we are live. So, hi guys, I am Bethany Quinn. I'm here with Quintersectional Conversations, and I have Meg Massey on again, who is my awesome friend who is writes about impact investment, also sometimes writes burlesque shows, also travels a lot, and is overall just a really cool person. So thanks for coming on, Meg.
Thank you.
And while we chat, I'm going to be making bacon fat Gingersnaps, which are so delicious and dangerous. And I'm not going to say that they're better cooked or raw than cooked, but so it's fine.
Saying that. No, I love anything with ginger in it. I think because there's a history of like stomach issues in my family.
There you go.
I put ginger in things where ginger shouldn't be, but I love it so much.
Ginger is really one of those fantastic, and I feel like underrated ingredients too. It's apparently really good for your immune system too.
Totally.
I did say that we would talk about blended finance. So I feel like you should just give a brief explanation of what blended finance is, and then we should move on to talks about travel. You there? Oh, shit.
Yes, well, those two are related because, so what is blended finance and how does it relate to travel? I'm going to make this happen and you're just going to have to stay with
Love
me.
it.
So blended finance. Blended finance is when money from a government or a development finance institution, and I will explain what that is in a second, is invested in a country that's an emerging market. So that's a lot of countries in Southeast Asia and parts of sub-Saharan Africa and in parts of Latin America, where the economy is just kind of starting to engage to really take off. And because that capital because there's capital going in from the public sector, private investors take that as a sign that this is it de-risks their participation. It's a little less risky for them to start investing in these markets that aren't as well defined or as well known because there is these large development finance institutions backing it up. So blended finance is when an impact investing deal is made with money from both of those, both the public and the private sector. And so what is a development finance institution? So glad you asked that question.
I am so glad I did too.
So a development finance institution, the simplest way to explain it is foreign aid, but not really. In the U.S., we have USAID, and they give grants to countries around the world that the U.S. is helping in some way or another, in one way or another. But there's also the U.S. Development Finance Institution, which used to be known as OPIC, and that's and what they do is they are making investments. They are expecting a return when they put their money in, but the idea is that they because they're a government agency, it's less risky for them to get involved essentially, and they have channels to work. If the country's coming out of a dictatorship or is like politically unstable in some way, they can help make that environment better for the private investor to come in, and then they can work with that private investor to put together a deal. And so that is blended finance, and it's I do not know off the top of my head how big that market is, but it's starting to.
Well, it's also expanding.
It's definitely
quickly.
Been growing in recent years. So that is something to keep an eye on, especially for those of us who enjoy traveling. See, I told you I'd bring it back around.
Love it. So where do you enjoy traveling, Meg?
Well, I was gonna start with like travel to emerging markets. Emerging markets is the politically correct financial term for a developing country, or and probably our parents' generation would call a third world country, which is not okay to say anymore. And developing country also isn't a great term because it implies that it's not really a country and the people there aren't really citizens of that country. So emerging market is like the most PC term that I've heard.
That is good to know.
Probably others. And I've done a little bit of travel. So far, I've only been to 3 countries that would plausibly be called emerging markets, and we're all on the less mostly emerged. So
which countries have you been to that fall into
when private investment goes in, when you have blended finance vehicles or other investment in these countries, it often helps strengthen whatever tourism the country's trying to attract, because it can stabilize that economy and also just make it less risky for travel. So the 3 that I've been to are Colombia in South America, and then India and Indonesia in Southeast Asia. Although, like I said, all 3 of those countries, I don't know that they're technically emerging markets. So.
Right. Got it. Awesome. So, so where else do you want to travel, Meg? Coming up, once this gets lifted from quarantine.
Yeah. So far, there are 2 continents that I haven't visited, and that is Africa and Antarctica.
Nice.
And in the before times, I really wanted to plan a trip to Africa, because Antarctica is obviously a bit of a project to get to. Africa is very doable, or at least it was when we weren't in a global pandemic.
Right.
I've been to 23 countries around the world, and it had just never happened. Some of that travel was for work, and then I stayed on and did my own exploring. Some of that was travel to places where I had friends living, and some of it was just, I'm really interested in going to this place. And for whatever reason, Africa, the whole continent, has just never been in any of those buckets for me.
Right.
And in the before times, I was researching, because Africa is obviously a large continent. It is like 3 times the size of the United States.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's large and has really diverse geography. So when you say you want to go to Africa, do you want to go to the desert? Do you want to go hiking by a waterfall? Do you want to go to the beach? Do you want to be in a city? Like, there are so many different types of experiences. And in the before times, I was going through the process of figuring out, like, okay, what kind of trip do I want my first trip to Africa to be?
Yeah.
And I was sort of honing in on Kenya, going to Nairobi, and then exploring outside the city and some of the natural world out there. There's some good hiking, farms. And the other place was Cape Town in South Africa, which is just supposed to be one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I was a little put off because Cape Town sounds like it's highly westernized, and I really wanted something a bit more, unique, something closer to a more, not feeling like I was in the West.
Right.
So so those are the 2 that I've been thinking about. And once this is all over and it's safe to travel internationally again, I'm really hoping to start making concrete plans to go to one or hopefully both of those places.
Awesome. Nice. And then, because I know that part of your thinking generally has been that you want to become more of a digital nomad. So how is that process going for you? How are you thinking about that, actually?
Yeah, so my thinking on it has definitely evolved over time, but the way I realized a little, like probably 2 years ago, that I wanted a life, very much including a career, where if I felt like working from another country for a month, I could do that pretty seamlessly.
Right.
And I've worn a bunch of different hats in my career, but at the end of the day, I'm a writer, and that is something that can theoretically be done from anywhere. So I started taking steps to make that transition. 2 years ago, I was working for an organization that had an entirely remote team, and I was able to do a lot of travel because of that job. But it also gave me experience with being being remote full time and what it's like to not be in an office with all your coworkers all the time. And helped me get used to that. And then a year ago, when I started working for myself, same thing. I start, learning how do you discipline yourself? How do you set your, how do you arrange your schedule every day so that you're being productive and continuing to get used to working with teams in a remote way. And the first real test I had of that was when I was in Amsterdam and then London this past fall. And both of those trips were conferences, but I built in time in both of those places to just be remote for a few days and, working from coffee shops or co-working spaces, and so that I could get a feel for it, because DC is my home, and I wherever I go in the world, I'll always end up back here. I sort of know that at this point.
Yeah.
But it was just finding a way to really but we all get sick of the place that we are currently in, and I can definitely say for sure that I love my apartment and also kind of want to go as far away from it as possible when all this is over. So everyone needs a break, and this was my way to build in a break. Nice.
Very cool. So I don't know, what else did you want to talk about travel?
I mean, I mostly just wanted to talk about places I've been.
So tell me, what are some of your crazier travel stories?
It's hard being stuck in one place, and but when you're able to kind of look at, I've been looking at a lot of my photos from various trips I've taken, and it's been really nice to trying looking at the photo and being like, I remember that day. I remember what the air smelled like. I remember this little detail about something I saw, something that I ate, and just trying to really kind of bring myself there in my mind.
Yeah. Okay. So hyperbolic questions.
That's been, one of the big things I can talk about is solo travel, which I think everyone should do at least once.
Definitely.
Yeah. So solo travel, I mean, this is my first solo trip was in 2015. And when I say solo trip, I'd gone by myself to friends' weddings before, so it wasn't the first time I'd gotten on a plane by myself or whatever, but it was that was the first time that I flew somewhere for the sole purpose of having a vacation, and I didn't plan it with a friend. I didn't go with anybody. And so I mapped out my itinerary on my own, and that was it was my 30th birthday, and I went to the south of France for a week, and that was a totally selfish pick. I had been looking at pictures of Provence on Instagram. I had studied French in high school and college, and was kind of looking to get it back. And it was in a period of my life where I really needed to kind of plan something and focus on that. And so I did all the research for it, it's very freeing to plan a trip somewhere and not be bound by what the other person or other people want to do, or if you're traveling for a wedding or some other type of event, around all of that, it's also a little overwhelming. When I landed in I did fly into London, and I saw a friend there for a couple days, but then I got on the Eurostar and went first to Lyon in central France for a night. And I remember getting off that train in Lyon. I was and I couldn't check into my Airbnb for a few hours, so I found this little cafe in windy cobblestone street, textbook France. I think there was actually an accordion playing nearby.
Nice.
About as French as you can get. I ordered lunch, and I had a glass of wine with lunch, because you do that in France. And I was sitting outside at this cafe table, and all around me were these French people sitting with friends having conversations. And I, about 10 minutes in, felt almost burst into tears. I was like, oh shit.
It's one of those beautiful travel moments.
What do I do? And
yeah.
So I got through my lunch, and then was able to go check into my Airbnb, and I like took a nap because I was so overwhelmed. Like, because I hadn't really made plans for that day in Leon. Because I was only there for less than a day, and I figured I'd still be jet lagged. So I had a bit of an itinerary for the South of France part of the trip, but not for this particular day. And I woke up from my nap, and it was like dusk, and I was like, basically, I still felt like crying, and so I texted one of my best friends, my friend Sally, because she had texted me and said like, "Hey, how's France?" And I was like, "Well, I'm crying in an Airbnb alone, so not super great."
Oh.
And I know, and she was like, "Okay, well, here's the thing: you wanted to go on this trip. You chose to do this, and if you had put it off." Because at one point, she and I were talking about going to France together, and then it, for various reasons with our schedules, it just hadn't worked out.
Yeah.
And she was like, if you had waited to go with me, you may never have gone.
Right.
And she was like, so what you need to do is just dive in there and explore. And I was like, what do you mean explore? And she was like, go get lost. Go get lost in Lyon and find your way back to your Airbnb.
That's
and
awesome.
So this is like sunsetting in a foreign city. But I was so desperate that I was like, okay, fine. And I went for a walk at sunset around Lyon. I got myself lost. I had my phone, so I wasn't like lost, but
right.
I just wandered around the city for like 3 hours.
Nice.
And it was incredible. And and then I did the same thing the next day before I got on my train to go to the south of France, which was, the point of the trip. And it was this really, really formative experience of like, it can be really overwhelming to be totally in charge of what you do.
Yeah.
But getting through that, and like what I needed was exactly what my friend said. I needed to get lost and find my way back. Because when I am traveling with other people, I'm always the person who's like, ooh, let's go down this alley. Like, ooh, let's pop into this shop. Let's go to that museum. And people either...
They don't always take it as well.
No, we were doing this other thing that we agreed on. And to let myself kind of indulge in that spontaneity, like whatever came to mind, I was like, okay, I'll do that.
Nice.
It's something that I feel so strongly that everyone who's in a position financially to try it should try it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, give me 30 seconds.
I've been talking a lot.
No, not at all. I don't want to interrupt you with grinding. That sounded really bad, didn't it?
Yeah. Sounds like a train whistle.
It sounds like what?
It sounds kind of like a train whistle.
There you go. It actually does. All right. That is still not very ground. All right.
Yeah. Well, when you're done, I have a travel story actually that's somewhat pandemic related.
That sounds good. All right, I'm going to call it there. All right. So tell me.
So after this trip to France, I decided that at least once a year I was going to go on a solo trip somewhere.
Nice.
And it usually was in the fall, and it was something that I could plan and look forward to all year. And in 2016, in June, one of my oldest and dearest friends, he's actually my godbrother, he and his wife lived in Edinburgh, and we were, catching up, and he said they were opening a restaurant in Edinburgh in November, and I had been wanting to visit them, and so he was like, this would be a great time, you can come to the opening, whatever. So I booked a flight to Scotland for the week after the 2016 election. And we had a whole running joke about how, like, we were going to toast, like,
Hillary Clinton.
Brexit being voted down and Hillary Clinton being the next president. And obviously, neither of those things happened.
Awkward. Yeah.
And so I was a wreck and a half after that election.
Yeah, I think everybody was.
Not normal for a while, as I think a lot of people weren't. I couldn't sleep, so I was prescribed medication to help calm my anxiety and sleep. I flew over there. I actually first did a few days in Ireland because I'd never been there. I did a few days in Dublin solo, and then went over to Edinburgh. And when I was in Edinburgh, started developing. I told you my family has stomach issues. With me, it's also like I won't get graphic about it, but basically like IBS, but really bad. And it started really, really acting up when I was in Scotland. I called my doctor and she basically was like, yeah, that medication that you're on for your anxiety, like, isn't great for what you have.
Right.
And, there was an emergency medication that I could take, and I had some back at my apartment, but I hadn't needed it in like 3 years. So I had left it behind on the trip.
Yikes.
And she was like, I'll see you when you get back to the US, but like, there's nothing I can do for you right now. And I was like, okay, I can power through this. And I powered through Scotland and then got down to London. And on Thanksgiving Day, 2016, I woke up and was like, I'm not sure how much more of this I can take. And fortunately, I was staying with a friend in London who is a veterinarian. So she is not grossed out by anything and knows the UK healthcare system for both humans and animals very well.
Nice.
So she's like, we need to take you to A&E, which is British ER. And I was like, no. Like, it's not that, it's not serious. I'm not dying. I'm just uncomfortable. And she was like, yeah, so you go to A&E. And I was like, but I don't want to spend Thanksgiving sitting in an emergency room for 9 hours.
Right.
And she was like, that doesn't happen here. And I was like, I don't believe you. And she was like, watch this. So we go to British emergency room. Within 15 minutes, I am seen by a nurse. And I tell her, I'm an American tourist. I have this condition. It's being aggravated. I need this emergency medication that is back in the US. What do I do? And she like wrote something down on a form and was like, take this to basically their urgent care facility in 1 hour. And I was like, that's it? And she was like, yeah. And I asked her, like, do I owe you any money? And she looked at me like I was insane and was like, no. So took my thing. An hour later, I went with my friend to the urgent care place, was seen within 5 minutes of the time they wrote down on my little card. And this is central London. This wasn't like out in Bumblefuck, England. This was central London, where there were definitely other people in all of these waiting rooms. Got seen by, I think, the equivalent of a physician's assistant. I told him the same thing I told the nurse. Gave him the little slip, and he was like, great, well, I'm going to write you a prescription for like a 3-day supply of this medication because that was how long I had before I flew back.
Right.
And I said, great. And I said, again, like, how much money do I owe you? And he said, well, it'll probably be, he was like, well, because you're not a UK citizen, it'll be $8.99 to fill the prescription medication. Right. And I was thinking £899. Right. And I was like, okay, this is what emergency credit cards are for. Like, right. It's like, I'll figure it out when I get back home. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's a lot, and he was like, how much do you think a lot is? And I said, £899. He starts laughing at me and goes, no. £8.99. It's like, I'm so sorry that we have to charge you, but you're not a British taxpayer. And I was like, that's completely fair. But he gave me the prescription. I walked out. My friend still talks about this to this day because she was sitting in the waiting room with me. She watched me. I skip out, stand up, go like this, and go, I love socialism. Everyone's staring at me, and I go, guys, if this was America, you'd all be here for 12 hours and thousands of dollars in debt. Bye. Yeah. She like leads me out, like, oh, and all these British people were like, oh my, like, what just happened?
That's really funny.
But that is my socialized medicine story that, I've told people since then, and it's so funny to tell Americans that because they're like,
they understand.
Like, wait, you mean you didn't, like, all the things you hear about it, and granted, like, I knew exactly what was wrong with me and what I needed, and according to all of my British friends, they're like, yeah, if you walk in with that information, it's great. If you don't know what's wrong with you, the diagnostics and the NHS aren't great, I guess, but I've had that one experience with socialized medicine, and it was amazing. So go socialism. I 10 out of 10 would go to that ER again.
Well, awesome. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. It's 1:30, and I got the impression that you needed to hop off.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've got a packed day
Totally
today,
fine.
so
You'll
I
just have to
this was
come back
lovely
on the
to
show another
chat about
time.
something totally not my apartment or my daily life for a bit.
Awesome.
How are the ginger cookies coming?
They are coming very well. They're so fucking good. I can't even begin to express to you. I've got these. You need to come over later. You need to swing by later to pick up some of these ridiculously delicious cookies sometime.
Do a social distant handoff.
Exactly. So thank you, yes, for taking these off my hands. So anyway, thank you again for coming on. We'll have to talk again sometime soon.
I can take one for the team on this.
It's, I really appreciate you just taking this bullet for us.
Sacrificing myself.
Sacrificing yourself for the bacon fact Gingersnaps. So, all right, hon. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.